At the end of approximately every single season of The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, the host will go up and say, "Guys, this is the most dramatic breakup we've ever seen on the show." Because they say that pretty much every season, the actual owner of that dubious honor is currently unknown. However, as a Bachelor historian, I have come to a decision. I believe that that honor belongs to Arie Luyendyk Jr. and Becca Kufrin for their 2018 engagement-ending breakup, which was filmed and aired in its entirety. But not only is it the most dramatic breakup in Bachelor history, but I think it's also a very interesting case study in media ethics, both on the part of the producer and the consumer. Let's get into it. Let's start this analysis by talking about the players. Now we're going to begin with the two people on screen. In one corner, we have Arie Luyendyk Jr., the Bachelor, a Virgo man, and if the show is to be believed, the best kisser they ever had on the franchise. How they measured that, I have no clue, but they nicknamed him the Kissing Bandit because of it. In the other corner, we have Becca Kufrin. She's an Aries from Minnesota, and she just radiates like cool aunt energy. But there are some other people in this equation. Number one, we have BURNHAM. She was the runner-up. She didn't get proposed to, but she's this very shy Scorpio who Arie Luyendyk Jr. had a really intense connection with. Now, you're gonna hear more about her later. But the fourth person, and by person I mean people because it's more of like a shadowy conglomerate, we have the producers. The producers, we never see them, but we know that they're there. And they're kind of the wizard behind the whole like Oz machine, right? They're the wizard behind the curtain, and they're gonna be a big part of our focus, so don't forget about them. Before we perform our ethical examination and pass moral judgments onto all of these players, I'm gonna try to give you an unbiased-ish account of like what actually went down, right? Most dramatic breakup in Bachelor history, like how did it happen? This is what happened. As it was coming to the end of Arie Luyendyk Jr.'s season, he was between an impossible choice, Becca and Lauren. And he decided that he was going to break up with Lauren and propose to Becca. And he had to do it in that order, all on the same day. So first he breaks up with Lauren, and he's so torn and so broken over it that he's crying, he's a mess, and he in fact even tells Lauren that he loves her as she gets into the car to leave. And then he has to pull himself together, and he manages it. He proposes to Becca with a ring so big it can be seen from outer space. She says yes, they laugh, they hug, they kiss, and just like that, Arie and Becca are engaged. And it's awesome, it's great. But here's the thing. After the events of the show, the newly engaged couple must basically go into hiding because in the time between the proposal and the season finale, the Bachelor producers are really serious about the fact that the couple can't be like in public with each other because then there are spoilers to the season and everything, so, you know, total no-go. But that also means that all of these freshly engaged couples who were caught up in this whole big whirlwind are suddenly in a long-distance relationship for a couple months, and that's not easy at all. To ameliorate the risk factor that naturally comes with it, ABC will fund what are called Happy Couple Weekends. Happy Couple Weekends are these little weekend getaways that the newly engaged couple get to go on. It's super secret, it's super romantic, you don't have to pay for it, and 2 months after the proposal, on a Happy Couple Weekend, Arie brings with him a camera crew, which is very unusual, and immediately Becca can kind of tell that something is off because it's pretty unheard of to bring cameras to your Happy Couple Weekend. And then Arie Luyendyk sits her down, and with cameras recording and watching every moment and looming over the scene the entire time, he breaks up with Becca. He explains to her that he's still in love with Lauren, and obviously she's mad, she's upset, she's crying. She knew that he was struggling with continuing feelings for Lauren, but she had no idea that he was gonna end the engagement over it, right? And then Arie leaves, some time passes, and he gets back together with Lauren, who accepts him with open arms. And then the rest of the season airs. They get to the season finale where they air the proposal and then all 25-ish minutes of the breakup. All of it. It's actually pretty unprecedented what they do because the Bachelor producers decide to air all of the footage they got. They air it on screen concurrently as it was recorded. So it includes all of the awkward pauses, all of the shots where the camera was just on and facing a wall, all of it. Then Chris Harrison does a small interview with Becca and announces that the next day they are going to get extra time to really figure out and do all of the interviews and talk about all of the aftermath and see where everything is that day. So they get exactly 1 day of feedback, 1 day of Twitter responses, of cyberbullying, of reviews and articles online. And then we get to see, after the final rose, part 2, which is really all about the response, right? They aired this crazy piece of footage, this crazy 25-minute long piece of footage, and then it's all about what now. Immediately, there's this intense backlash against Arie and Lauren. They get cyberbullied, they get mean billboards put up about them. It gets to the point where a member of the Minnesota House of Representatives drafts a bill banning Arie Luyendyk from the state. While there's backlash with, Arie and Lauren, there's Becca Kufrin, who pretty much overnight becomes an American princess. She's lauded for her grace and her elegance in handling the whole situation, since there was no screaming, there was no throwing things, which is the bar for reality TV elegance. People start doing this thing where they'll Venmo her for a drink, right? They'll be like, oh man, that poor girl got her breakup aired in its entirety on national television. She's earned a drink. So many people donate that the fund gets to be about $6,000. On live TV, Chris Harrison sits down across from Becca, tells her about this fund, and says, what do you want to do with it? And without missing a beat, she says, donate it. He asks her to name a charity. She picks Stand Up for Cancer, pretty much off the top of her head. And then he says, okay, we'll match it. So pretty much as a somewhat direct, indirect response to this breakup that got aired, about $12,000 went to cancer research. $6,000 from Becca, $6,000 from the show, and then however much came from people who watched the show and were like, that's cool, I'm also gonna donate. Then, at the end of After the Final Rose 2, they bring Arie and Lauren on stage, and they talk about how hard it was and how they're doing now. And then on stage, with everybody watching, Arie gets down on one knee and he proposes to Lauren with a ring so big it can be seen from outer space. What an event. So that was the event. Now let's go into the ethics. Let's dig in. Let's pass all of the moral judgments and throw all of the tomatoes that I know we've been waiting for. This all happened. In 2018, it was on television and everybody sat down and watched it. So now let's decide here and now who was in the wrong. Let's go back to our players. Player number 1, Arie, right? The guy, the Bachelor, the kissing bandit. Was he right or wrong? Was he human? Or was he a total douchebag for the way he handled all of that? His mistake was proposing when he wasn't sure, but the truth is that it was pretty hard to not propose, especially when he was working on a timeline. On day 1, Arie walked in and said, I'm getting engaged at the end of this. And then on the last day, they said, okay, we're all scheduled. Today's the day when you need to decide. And so he sat down and he made the decision that he thought was best at the time, and then it settled in and he realized what had happened and the mistake that he had made. And he apologized over and over, but he probably could have handled it better. Namely, the big issue was that he invited the cameras when he broke up with Becca. The reason that he says he did this was because he wanted people to know that it was all on him. He said, I invited the cameras because I fucked up, and I didn't want there to be any lingering question over whether or not Becca messed up in any way, shape, or form, because she didn't. It was all me, and I'm gonna fall on my sword about it. And that's why he invited the cameras. Was that right? I don't think so. I think it still opened Becca up to a lot of exposure that she didn't really need, but I kind of get why he was doing it in a whole guilt mea culpa way, right? And then we have the other player, Becca, who was on screen, and she's pretty clean. We can all agree she was pretty clean. She did fine. She took it like a champ. And maybe she kind of threw him under the bus after the fact, but she forgave him on national TV after watching their 25+ minute breakup aired in its entirety. She sat across from him and was like, I forgive you. She's fine. Then we have Lauren. If you prescribe to really rigid, rule-based, deontological, ethical morals, then you might find that Lauren B did a pretty strong break of girl code. But past the girl code violation, which isn't that strong because she and Becca weren't that tight anyway, there's not really much. It's time that we get into the real meat of this ethical examination, the producers. Now, the producers are the least visible, but I would argue the most powerful members of this whole thing. And they're kind of where all the real decision-making lies. The first major decision that the Bachelor producers made in this whole mess was their decision to nerf Arie Luyendyk Jr. After all, they utilized their platform and their editing powers to make Arie look like a complete and utter jackass. They even did voiceovers for recaps that were like, how could Arie do this to Becca? And you may be thinking, Emma, how could they not make him look like a total jackass? He ended his engagement to go with the other girl. And the reason why I think that they didn't have to do that is because merely a year before, Ben Higgins said, I love you to both of the women, and he got off pretty much scot-free. At the end of the season, Chris Harrison looked at this man and told Ben Higgins that he should be on the Mount Rushmore of bachelors. And that's after he said, I love you to 2 girls. I think that it was possible to give Arie a little bit of a nicer treatment, especially if they knew that he was going to be the subject of a lot of attention, especially on social media where anybody can say anything to anyone. I will give them a tiny amount of credit because in 2008, Jason Mesnick was the Bachelor and he did essentially the exact same thing that Arie did, and the show handled it much worse that time. They had Melissa Rycroft, Jason's spurned fiance, sit across from him and throw the ring at him and everything. It was pretty trashy. They even had Jason Mesnick come on stage with his runner-up, who he ended up marrying, Molly, and basically tell the audience, hey guys, maybe don't cyberbully Arie, he was following his heart. But in equal measure, they had people like Becca Martinez, who was on Arie's season, go on stage and say, he's manipulative, he's evil, he's the worst. They tried to show both sides, knowing that whatever they put on screen would impact Arie and Lauren very seriously. All this being said, Arie knew that what he was going to do would be unpopular. He was warned that he was going to get backlash, and he said, okay, I'll do it for Lauren because I love her. Where you put that, I don't know. The second big decision that I want to examine is the producers' decision in the culture they created with the show. As producers, they have a lot of power, and one of those powers is talking to leads and framing their expectations. The producers created a culture where Arie had to propose. For example, they didn't really stress other options. They weren't asking him, hey, what if you just dated them if you're this conflicted? They said, okay, you're that conflicted? Gee, I wonder who you're gonna pick to propose to. But their decision to create and perpetuate that culture pretty much invented this mess, which made for great TV, but had some serious effects on the people involved. The third, and to me, meatiest decision that the producers made was their move to air the unedited version. All roughly 25 minutes of it on air on national television for everybody to see. Was it invasive or was it fair? Some people might say that the worst part of reality TV is that it's edited, right? This idea that they're turning stuff that actually happened into this artifice, into this product that you can consume. But what if there's no artifice? What if it's just the thing on camera for everybody to see? Does that make it more okay, or does that make it somehow worse? The first question that people always ask when trying to figure out if this was okay was whether or not they got permission. What happened is that they got permission to air it, and they got Arie's permission to record it. Technically, at any point, Becca could have looked at the cameras and said, "Get the fuck out of here, this is between me and Arie." She didn't, for many reasons that I don't know of because I don't know Becca Kufrin, even though I've seen her get broken up with on TV. But she didn't. And she let them air it, Arie let them air it, for whatever reasons they did. Becca watched it and said that it was hard, but it gave her some interesting closure because she was able to look at it from a truly outside perspective. She got to see it all play out without any of her own emotion coloring it, and according to her, that kind of helped in a weird way. But also, to be fair, she could have just said that because she was being asked by Chris Harrison on national TV if it was okay that they just aired her breakup. And Chris Harrison isn't really a guy that you want to make mad, nor are the omniscient, mysterious Bachelor producers. When trying to measure if it was ethical for the producers to air this, one path that we can take to that is ethical emotivism. Now, ethical emotivism is this idea that our gut feelings are usually right and that we should use them to guide our decisions. And if we're going through that, a lot of people had a strong gut reaction to the footage, which was, "I shouldn't be watching this. This is fucked up that I'm allowed to watch this." In fact, even real-life Bachelorette JoJo Fletcher tweeted, stop filming her. This is terrible," right? And the fact is that when I watched it, I kind of felt that. I felt like it was riveting television, and I also felt like I shouldn't have been able to see it. It's complicated. And so if we're using our guts as a guide, a lot of us could be led into the idea that airing the whole thing crosses a line. There's also the fact that after watching all of this footage, a lot of people felt like they were justified in cyberbullying Arie, right? They were like, okay, I just watched about 25 minutes of this guy being a complete and utter douchebag, so I know what happened. I know all the info that I need to know, and I know that this guy sucks. So a lot of people proceeded like that. So those are the three major producer decisions, and you can land where you want on them. There's also the consideration that Arie was under pressure to propose, and the producers were under pressure to, make really good reality TV, to cause shit, and to do all this stuff, because what they have as executive producers of The Bachelor is a really intense job. They have a lot of pressures that if they don't make a good season, especially when ratings were already dipping, that they could lose their jobs, that stuff could happen. So as we're considering the pressure for Arie, let's consider the pressure for the producers too. And let's be considering everything as we move into our final utilitarian calculus, where we decide once and for all if it was right or wrong. So let's talk about the positives. Number one, telling the truth, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. This is the part where I explain that Arie Luyendyk Jr. officially disputes that this is the whole thing. According to him, what was cut was producers telling him to go back inside, because there was a period during this breakup where Becca says, "Leave, I'm done, we're good. You've broken up with me, we're fine." And Arie leaves for a little bit and then comes back inside and keeps poking and saying, "Well, we're not done, we're not done." And everybody hated Arie for it because it was super uncomfortable and unnecessary. Arie says that that wasn't his idea. That was the producers. And the producers cut it because it made them look bad. And when you are in the editing room and you're allowed to cut what makes you look bad, but not what makes Arie look bad, you're going to do the former. I am inclined to believe Arie Luyendyk in this because I have a fundamental distrust of the producers here. And I can totally see why they would have made that decision and still said this is unedited, because it was good, flashy television. But there's still a question there. If it is the complete and utter truth, does that make the whole thing okay? I don't know. There's also, when we're factoring all of this, the fact that we must consider that everything worked out in the end. Like, nobody died. Yes, Arie and Lauren got super crazy cyberbullied, but they also got married. They got a ring on ABC's dime. They have 3 kids now. They have a great booming app on the App Store. They're doing fine, it seems. And Becca Kufrin, she's fine. her breakup was aired and it was really hard, and then she became the Bachelorette because it's a truth universally acknowledged that all great bachelorettes rise out of the ashes of a bachelor who has seriously fucked up. She was a great bachelorette. Her season ended with an engagement. She and the guy were engaged for 2 years before they broke it off, and then she went on Bachelor in Paradise where she met the man who she's now engaged to and who's the father of her kid. She seems fine. Everybody who participated, even if it was hard, is fine. We're not dealing with a scenario where there is this really clear, long-lasting harm. And there's also the fact that not only are they fine, but they're kind of better off for it. For all of the psychological damage that this almost certainly caused, they got fame, they got money, they got Instagram followers out the wazoo, and they still do. How much is that worth? The final positive is the only hard and fast number we have on this, which is at least $12,000, which all went to cancer research. If the whole breakup didn't happen, that money wouldn't have happened. I don't think it would have. If the breakup wasn't so extreme and intense and graphic, I don't know if it would have caused such a groundswell of support. I don't know if people would have said, oh, I need to give this poor girl money, look at what she's going through. And I don't think they would have. If it weren't for this crazy media event, it probably would have been just another super dramatic breakup that ends a Bachelor season. It probably just would have been Jason Mesnick again. This means that in my positive columns is pretty much all, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. So let's talk about the negatives. Number one, there's obfuscating the truth about what happened. If we believe Arie, which I do, if that's true, I think it's wrong. I think it's unfair, at the very least. There's the second column, which is the sheer volume of cyberbullying and death threats that this caused. It was a blunt force object that was used to cause great harm and stress to all those involved, and I think we can all agree that cyberbullying and death threats aren't good. That's not an I don't know, that's a pretty solid. Which leaves, in our final utilitarian calculus, a big old question mark. Like most ethical questions that fall right in that gray area of right or wrong, you kind of just need to decide for yourself. Granted, I haven't decided for myself. I have no fucking clue. I'm still right in the middle, and I made a whole YouTube video about it. I watched all of this multiple times, and I still don't know how I feel about it. So these are all the pieces of the puzzle. What do you think?